Hello, everyone. I'm Jason D'Souza, the host of Fresh Air on CBC Radio 1, CBC Ontario's weekend morning show. And I have the pleasure of being the moderator today for our event, Love is Love is Love. IFFSA Toronto aims to use the medium of cinema to address important societal issues. And one of those issues is LGBTQ representation, specifically within South Asian cinema. And through the power of storytelling, IFFSA wants to shine a light on the discrimination that the LGBTQ community continues to experience, but also a celebration as well. Bringing a diverse group of panelists together today allows us to get those unique perspectives and will allow for a better understanding around diversity and inclusion within the LGBTQ context. We've seen hate crimes rise, especially over the course of this past year in the midst of the pandemic. And it's more important now than ever to create awareness, recognize and celebrate the diversity that surrounds us, and accept the differences that create a more loving and accepting world. I should also mention that CBC Toronto is extremely proud to be a longtime sponsor of IFFSA Toronto. So thank you very much again for our continued connection with the community. And without further ado, it's my pleasure now to have the opportunity to introduce all of you to our incredible panelists today. Faraz Arif Ansari is an international award-winning non-binary queer independent filmmaker. Fawzia Mirza is a queer Muslim, Pakistani, Indian, Canadian, American writer and director. And Sonali Patel is an LGBTQ plus scholar, activist, motivational speaker, and influencer. Hello to everyone. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
It is a real pleasure to get to speak with all of you. Fawzia, if I can start with you, when you reflect on queerness, specifically within the South Asian context, how much do you think it differs than the quote unquote almost status quo that comes with the queer white perspectives that we're familiar with?
Well, I mean, I think that one of the challenges that I've had in just sort of being a queer person in general, take it even out of the context of creating or of art or of film. I know that when I started trying to come out in the US and in Canada in around 2006, 2005, it just didn't make sense to people. And they were like, what? And I was struggling with it. And at the time I didn't have the words for why it was such a struggle. And people were like, just come out. I mean, I remember I was dating somebody who was like, write a letter to your mom. And I was like, if I wrote a letter to my mom, she would slap me. And so the concept of what it means to be out or to be public or to be a visible queer person, it's a different context when you're talking about not just like a cis white man coming a cis white man coming out versus someone, not just a South Asian person coming out, but like once you add, whether you're Black, whether you're Muslim, whether you're raised Southern Baptist, once you add all these complexities and all these layers to it, maybe conservative family, etc. But like those layers add a lot of complexity and add a lot of challenge to the process. And that was really challenging for both me to understand and to kind of give myself a little grace for what the process of coming out really means. Because also coming out, that phrase is so Western and so white. And I think, Harvey Milk talks a great deal about, we talk about like Harvey Milk as being this icon of you must come out, but that still is a very one-dimensional way of thinking about the process of what it means to be visible and doesn't really take into account the danger, the complexity of being out and being visible that really encompasses a lot of people, both in the US and Canada, but also all over the world. So it's like, that's not even making movies. And so I would say that for me, everything I've ever made has been a very public conversation of a very private dialogue and a very private struggle that I've had in terms of reconciling what it means. Can I be gay and Muslim at the same time is really been central to my first short film that I ever made.
May I ask then, Fawzia, if it wasn't through writing a letter to your mom? I mean, what was your experience like, given that depth of nuance that you mentioned that comes with being part of, the cultural experience with coming out?
I definitely just, for me, it was social media. It was putting things online. It was every kind of way. Like if I posted a photo of something, people would comment and they'd be like, "Oh, wow, you were at this gay event." And if an auntie posted about it, or if a cousin commented on it, I was like, "Well, maybe they know I'm gay." My first short film was in 2012 called "The Queen of My Dreams," inspired by the song "Mere Sapno Ki Rani." And that film very much marked the first time that I was sharing this, like, I am gay and Muslim and love Bollywood romance. But I didn't even know if my mother saw any of this stuff. But for me, it was just the only way I knew how, because, it's like that direct eye to eye contact with the Desi mother is like kind of not what we're supposed to or allowed to do. And I write about this in a short story that I have in a anthology called Good Girls Marry Doctors, an anthology of South Asian women's stories. And in it, I talk about how I'm a witch. And one of the stories involves this story of me telling my mother, looking her in the face. And I'm like, she said to me, "You must change." And I said, "I cannot change." And she said, "You must change." And I said, "I can't change." And she said, "You're possessed by the devil." And after that, I cried, and it was Eid. And I've talked to a friend of mine and she said, "Your family is scared of your power." And that for me was a really revolutionary moment, because it just reminded me that no matter who you are, whether you're queer, whether you're into things your family isn't, people are never going to accept really or understand your full complexity of your identity, because we are all vast and expansive and beautiful and powerful and these transcendent beings. And in order to really claim that power, we will have people who are fearful of us. And whether that's our mothers or our friends, or even parts of ourselves, in order to claim that power, we have to recognize that we're going to have these moments and these obstacles, and that's okay.
So Nali, what do we lose? What's at risk if perhaps we're too often only exposed to, as Fawzia says, maybe more of a white framework, a westernized framework of queerness?
In short, actually, I would say we lose our authenticity. And actually, I agree with everything that Fawzia is saying. It's something that when we were talking about coming out, it really reminded me that, queerness actually existed in South Asia before colonialism. It was the British Empire that went on a sexual civilizing mission and completely, very violently erased queerness from our culture, rewrote Hindu scriptures to erase all mentions of it. So now when they're forcing us to come out in the diaspora, completely ignorant to the fact that, we were queer and that's authentic to us, and now they say that we're conservative, but they're recolonizing us in the diaspora. So it's almost like we already lost our culture, and now we're losing like just so much more of us and being asked to assimilate into ways that are like unsafe for us. So we're also losing that safety, and we're on both ends really losing family, because on one end, if we want to come out and if that's what feels best for us when we're choosing ourselves, that can often mean that we are at risk of losing family because of colonial violence years ago. But it also means that even if we want to be accepted into the LGBTQ plus queer family here, as in the queer community, we still are at a loss of that, because they will never genuinely accept us, because their view of South Asian queer bodies is always going to be outsiders, is always going to be, you aren't queer enough, your culture is the problem, you're conservative, because of that ignorance. So it's almost like in every way we're losing something, but that something is everything, right? And it's where we try so hard to hold on to this sense of community and to family. And it's just really, for a lot of LGBTQ plus South Asians, living this life of chronic stress.
And so if what you're saying is then you're between constantly that rock in a hard place between identity points, what kinds of conversations do you find you often have with queer South Asian, the people within the queer South Asian diaspora around trying to reclaim and find that identity?
A lot of it is around the struggle to, that struggle around coming out, where if we want to reclaim our space, that means that we have to risk our safety oftentimes, and do that juggling balance between how much can I do without my parents finding out if my parents aren't accepting. And it's really living that life on the edge. And for folks whose parents are accepting, that's fantastic, that's really great. But to really be able to represent those narratives from the closet, a lot of us are folks who are constantly risking our lives to put out that content, to fight for our space, to reclaim our space. I mean, I hide I hide behind academia and make my point, right? And it's to be able to reclaim our spaces is so important. And it's definitely a safety risk, but I think every form of medium that we have, whether it's filmmaking, whether it's academic articles, whether it's books or whatever it may be, it's all so powerful to be reclaiming our narrative and to be, asking for our space back that we rightfully deserve.
Faraz, when we talk about the importance of diversity and the importance of representation, especially on the big screen, this idea that if you see it, you can be it. I'm wondering if you feel one's sexuality, one's identity is included adequately enough within those conversations.
I don't think so. Sexuality or gender identity is ever been adequately included, especially in the mainstream. And when I use mainstream, I hate the word mainstream. So I want to use a word which is more closer to home, which is universal. And when we speak of universal cinema, I feel that most of the time there is a certain censorship of the queer identities that happens. A lot of times people don't want to do proper authentic real representations, and every time you see some sort of representation, that representation comes from a place of cis understanding of a queer folks. Most of the queer cinema, especially the universal mainstream, the queer cinema that is being made in India right now, is being made by cishet people, right? So the narrative still remains with them. It's very the opportunities to make the queer content uh, does not really fall very easily to queer storytellers or to a queer filmmakers. We're a handful of us, but most of the time the narrative continues to remain with the cishet people, even when it comes to queer representation. And therefore you see most of the representation, it does not come from a place of honesty, it does not come from a place of authenticity, it comes from a great deal of research versus rather than coming from a place of lived experiences, that a queer storyteller, a queer filmmaker can really bring forward. So I think there is always a gap of that sort that continues to, exist in mainstream to queer cinema in that sense. And I feel that that has been my journey, so far, to be honest, to be able to bring representation for myself. I grew up in the 90s, and I didn't really have any representation of myself on the big screen, or the small screen for that matter. I come from a Muslim family. I identify as a queer and a non-binary. I never saw myself on the big screen. And we're not just talking about being a queer person or being a non-binary person, but also being a Muslim person. Most of the representation when it comes to Muslim identities is revolving around Islamophobia. I mean, I don't live in a green home. I do not have to, continue saying that my name is so and so and I'm not a terrorist. I don't need to have a gun and I don't need to be connected with violence. So there is so much unlearning that one has to do, especially with cinema and representation, especially in the mainstream. And I feel that's where I think it's very essential to understand intersectionalities when we are speaking about even a queerness for that matter. I think a queerness cannot be looked at from a single dimension. It needs to be understood in the multidimensional spaces that it exists. It is multi-layered, and we need to constantly talk about that. And I think the other part that we usually miss out is whenever we talk about a queerness, topic which I feel is very essential to be talked about is privilege. And I feel that a privilege for a queer person, be it in India, be it in South Asia, or be it in the West, is a very important thing that, you know, needs to be addressed. I think we often lose out on privileges when we talk about a queerness or our journeys with our sexuality and gender identities. So I think it's imperative to also touch upon a privilege whenever we are having conversations about sexuality or gender identity, for that matter.
And when you talk about the authenticity and the solutions that can be found through developing on screen, I suppose at the very least, characters who have that intersectionality, is that just a case solely of creating these characters for people to be able to watch and relate to, or does there also have to be a depth behind just the actual visual representation you have from watching a character on screen?
It definitely has to do more than that, right? I mean, it's not just about being visible. It's not just about representation. It's about the right representation. It's about, bringing forward authenticity and championing that, I mean, there have been representation, and there still continues to be a lot of a queer, even for that matter, a POC representation, a QPO representation in the West. But I feel that what happens is that it always comes from a place where it comes from a place of a single sort of experience. It does not really translate on a larger scale. And I feel therefore it's imperative to open up these conversations to a larger sort of scale, to be able to add more dimensions, and therefore I think to bring forward intersectionalities. I think to be able to take the conversations on a larger scale and to speak to an audience that is not just not just a queer centric, but also to kind of bring the conversation forward in a more universal space, that my mother can watch the film, my grandmother can watch the film, a person, a queer person in Pakistan can watch the film, a queer person in Dallas can watch the film, and it speaks to everyone at the same time. And it makes everyone feel valued. It makes everyone feel included. It makes everyone feel that probably there is a part of me in this particular character, in this particular story, in this particular experience. And I feel that is what makes it more authentic, more human, and more universal in that sense.
Fawzia, I'd love to bring you in, and not maybe any sort of specific questions, but I wonder if you want to jump in on what Faraz had to say about the depth that's required, more than just the actual creation of a character who provides all those identity points.
I definitely don't think you can please everyone. That's something that I don't believe, and that's just by living day to day. I mean, I think there's definitely universality when you write the specifics, and I also know that my mother will never watch anything I make, no matter what I do. She doesn't want to. She will never, even though I write about her all the time, my mother will never watch my movies, but we connect in other ways over mangoes and biryani, like that's what we have. But I do think that it's just challenging too, right? Because the content, and I say this because I'm working on a feature film right now. I co-wrote a feature film with a queer Indian filmmaker named Anir, who made a film called I Am 10 years ago. And now we co-wrote a feature called We Are that will shoot in 4 cities in India. And it's queer stories in multiple different languages. And it's really a celebration of love and of queer joy. But it's interesting because where the storytelling in Hollywood with queer stories, whether it's right or wrong, whether we want it to be different or not, is very different than the place that the queer narrative and queer storytelling is writing this feature. And that's not a judgment. It's just that no culture, no community is the same. I mean, to touch on what Faraz said about privilege, I mean, privilege is essential when really thinking about where we fall in the landscape of being an out person. Privilege can be, well, you live in a country where it's legal to be gay. You live in a big city versus a small town where you have a lot of friends who you don't like these gay people, go hang out with those gay people. You don't want to hang out at this gay bar, go to that gay bar. But in certain communities, there's none of that. So the way we interact with community has to be really different. I mean, I'd say, and on top of that, I think that, I joke about the fact that the South Asians that I saw on TV were like Mindy Kaling and Apu. Forget about queer people. Forget about queer Muslim people. Even now, I think there's one queer Muslim person on TV, maybe two, in sort of Western TV, and they're not central. They're not the protagonists, and that's very much my mission. I've pitched TV shows where I've been told like, well, we already just saw that story in this like white family where there was this queer character. Oh, we just saw that story with this, non-Muslim Hindu family. Like, I don't know if it's kind of the same thing in this Muslim context. And I'm just like, take it out of the South Asian space. There's like 1.8 billion Muslim people in the world. There was this really big study that just came out by Pillars, led by Riz Ahmed and by USC Annenberg. And of the 200 international largest films in the world, there's one character who was LGBT, and that was a cis man. Also one Muslim character with a disability. So really like the data is really helpful, because we can sit here and talk about this all we want, but the executives, the gatekeepers, the buyers, they don't really change without something else happening. That's part of the struggle of the creation when we want it to kind of get to another level, is that there are gatekeepers at every single level. And the truth is that Hollywood is a system that needs to be dismantled just like any other system. And, I can't speak as much to like the Indian system or the Bollywood system, but these are all systems. They're not made for us. They're not designed for us. And, we do have to work differently, harder, be more creative, be more inventive, and have more, get more of our community involved to support what we're doing, and bring more allyship in, so it's sort of this like multi-tiered approach where there's the story that does need to be told authentically, like Faraz said, not by the straight people who are like, look at what I wrote. Isn't this a great gay, queer, trans, non-binary? Look how great the story is. We need to be the ones who are at the center of both the story and of the creation.
You touched on a number of things there that I'd love to unpack further in a moment, but Sonali, I wonder if we can talk maybe first about this idea of the gatekeepers and the power they have in terms of what makes it and what doesn't make it. And quite frankly, as you rightly point out, Fawzia, this idea that, we already have a story in the works with the brown character. We don't necessarily, you know what I mean? Like the actual base level conversations that a lot of people of color seem to come up against when it comes to the creation of authentic projects. How do you even begin to dismantle a level of gatekeeping that seems like it's always existed in these places?
That's actually a fantastic question, because my current research study is looking at why gatekeepers don't give queer South Asian women specifically access or representation. And I'm looking at, I did an ethnography of Pride Toronto to see why, as a broader understanding of LGBTQ plus organizations, but it seemed like the study findings were very generic, and it really just came down to they don't care about us. Like, they don't want to represent us. They don't want to learn about us. They really just want to pretend like we don't exist. And a major finding too is that, they would group in South Asians and all brown bodies as a broader person of color and say we're a person of color. But then when these gatekeepers are talking about people of color, there's actually zero representation of South Asians. It's almost like it's such like a black and white binary construction of race where no Asian diaspora exists in between. So we're thrown into this like evasive vacuum, but that vacuum doesn't actually have us. So then it's just a very interesting understanding of how gatekeepers will say, yes, like we're giving you your representation, but they're lying about it. They're actually not. And the real underlying reason is they genuinely just don't think that we're valuable and marketable for the audience, regardless of the fact that South Asians are the largest visible minority population in Canada.
Faraz, I saw you nodding along there. Would you like to jump in?
I think, I think it's very essential. There are gatekeepers everywhere. I really don't know much about Hollywood. I'm just really starting out in LA. I've just, managed to have a first few meetings in LA. So it's brand new to me, but I know about Bollywood or the Indian film industry, and they continue to they don't want the queer stories in the mainstream. They're very particular about that, and they really make sure that most queer stories don't really come in. It's only after the verdict of Section 377 by the Supreme Court in 2018, when 377 was read down. It's only after that that some mainstream production companies really started investing to get the pink rupee in, but I think prior to that, when I made my first short film, Sisak, I literally had to sell my car, I had to put my apartment on rent, and I had to make the film because nobody really wanted to make the film. And after Sisak went on and it won 60 international awards, the first for any Indian film, I thought my second film is going to be a cakewalk, but it wasn't. And I remember I was sitting in this meeting for Sheer Korma with a producer, and although my film happens to be about a non-binary person and a queer woman, both from a Muslim family, the first reaction that I got from this producer was, change them into really good-looking men with six-pack abs, number one. Number two, change them from a Muslim family into, a majority family. They didn't want to say Hindu, so they said majority family. And they said, when you when you make these two changes, just make sure you add a lovemaking scene, or at least a scene where they are shirtless or nude, because people want to watch that. The Western world really enjoys brown bodies when they're, making love. And I was like, what are you talking about? And then I think, what I had to do was to go away from the gatekeepers, to go to people from the community or to allies who really believe in celebrating a queer cinema authentically. And, it had to be like Fawzia said, it had to be multiple options that really had to come into play to be able to make the film that I wanted to make without really compromising on my vision, without, making a film about a non-binary Muslim character. We've never really done that before in Indian cinema. So I think you really have to really keep pushing the envelope. And, I think I have realized with time that the gatekeepers will continue to be who they are, how they are, and continue to refuse you. And therefore, I think it's very imperative to create structures where, that we come together and create ourselves, where we can find resources and find people who can support these stories and celebrate the cinema in the way it needs to be supported and celebrated.
How sustainable are those structures, though, if they have to be created and maintained on a grassroots level?
To be honest with you, Jason, I think, Sheer Korma right now has been produced by 5 producers. One of them is from India, the other 2 are from US, the other 2 are from UK. And not all of them identify on the queer spectrum. So it was interesting because I think it's also a matter of understanding that the budgets have to be very economical at the same time. So you really have to use a lot of your personal relationships, your goodwill. I mean, I worked with Shabana Azmi ji, Divya Datta, Swara Bhaskar, 3 of the leading, actors from Indian cinema. And it wasn't really easy because although they don't, they understand the reason why I'm trying to make this film, and they will charge not their market rates for a film like this. But I think it's just about the whole system that comes along with working with really big actors. You need to have the right locations and the right costumes, and your budget does really shoot up. So I think it's a thin line between how can I make it really good looking without compromising on the budget. So it's a lot of more hard work. It's a lot of more homework that one has to do. You have to put your relationships in motion and really try to push the envelope in trying to make a film that looks at par at any other production, made in Hollywood or wherever, and at the same time also try to celebrate the authenticity of the story. So I think it's a mix of all those things that really come into play.
Fawzia, Bollywood has been brought up a number of times already, and obviously I think it's impossible to have conversations about South Asian representation to any extent without talking about the long shadow that it has on so many within the South Asian diaspora. When you grow up watching Shah Rukh Khan and Madhuri Dixit and kind of that story, that quote unquote, the Bollywood story, as a young person, and you grow up with that, can you talk a little bit about, and I know you alluded to it briefly, but I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about the influence Bollywood has on, say, a conversation like this?
I mean, I grew up wishing and dreaming of the moment that like a man like Rajesh Khanna from Aradhana, him and Sharmila Tagore in that movie, like Rajesh Khanna wearing like this green mock turtleneck and this brown corduroy jacket, wearing his little topi in a Jeep, and Sharmila Tagore in a train. And like, I was like, oh my God, some sexy brown man is gonna find me and sing to me, Mere sapno ki rani kab aayegi tu? Like, you know, my queen of my dreams, when are you gonna come? And I'm like, I'm gonna be like, I'm right here, I'm in the train. Like, that was the dream, you know? And I was like, we are going to be in the mountains, it's gonna be beautiful. I'm gonna look so good in a sari, even though I barely, you know, knew how to wear ponytail. Like, I was a terrible young, good Pakistani girl. Like, I didn't know how to, I was terrible on picture day. But what part of what my personal journey has been, I mean, those films put an imprint on us in terms of creating the idea of what love and romance looks like. It's larger than life. It is romantic. It is dramatic. It is intense. There's no kissing. Let's remember, nobody kisses. So it's both like intense and romantic, but also like cleansed of sexuality in many ways. Like, there's also not that, but you still want that. And one of the stories that I tell about this is that I grew up dreaming that I would be the queen of some man's dreams. And then when I started coming out as queer, I thought, oh, I'm gonna be the queen of some woman's dreams. Like, some woman is gonna sing this song to me. And then as I got further along in my journey and really sort of started to understand the complexity of what both being an out queer person means, but also of how I'm going to be able to live my best self, I realized that I had to be the queen of my own dreams. That self-love was really the foundation that I needed in order to live my truth and live any kind of like fantasy and find love and find romance. And I do seek that out still, and you do see it imprinted. I was actually recently announced that my next feature, which will be my direct feature directorial debut, Me, My Mom, and Sharmila, Telefilm just announced that it's come on board to be a funder. But that project very much has a relationship of a queer girl and her mother with the touchstone of Indian film star Sharmila Tagore. And so much of that is because, you know, Sharmila Tagore, she was in 1969, she was iconic, you know, and she's still iconic. And she was, you know, on the cover of Filmfare magazine in a bikini. And it was just like, she was the first Indian woman ever to be photographed that way. And that sort of is the same era of my mother. And you think of like, you know, both that era in Pakistan, that era in cinema, that era of like the eyes and the hair and the way everyone dressed. I mean, I think it's deeply relatable to a generation of our family members, of our mothers, of our parents. And so that's super exciting. And that's inspired by a one-woman play that I wrote and performed of the same name. So, I mean, Bollywood is just imprinted, whether we like it or not. And obviously, you know, in Hollywood now, I point this way as if Hollywood is like right off screen. Really right off screen is my kitchen. So let's not get too excited. But, you know, we do see that crossover, you know, with famously Priyanka Chopra, but I don't know, there's still an allure. Like, who doesn't want that romance? But like, to me, it's like, how do we reinterpret it to be queer and trans and reflect our identities? And, you know, like Sonali was saying, we are ancient. And so how do we take these stories that were imprinted upon us and we embrace them in the most ancient way that comports with who we are and what we deserve.
So Sonali, let me ask you then, how do you reinterpret it then, given the stigmas and the stereotypes that also go hand in hand traditionally with an institute, if we can call it that, like Bollywood?
How do we reinterpret it for Bollywood? That's a great question. I think that it actually takes, I mean, once you grow up in like a Western nation and you're understanding queerness, because our exposure is to Western normative queerness, I feel like when we're coming back to understanding first our South Asian queerness, it takes a lot of unlearning and a lot of unlearning of the heteronormative queerness, where somebody has there's like a lot of the hetero gender constructs recreated in the queer community, where that typically, from what I've learned and found, isn't authentic in the queer spaces. It's a lot more of just we navigate things very fluidly, or at least just not the same way not as rigidly as white queer spaces typically. So I think that when we talk about representation and the way that we need to do it in like Bollywood, Hollywood spaces, I think it just comes a lot back to understanding what queerness means for queer South Asians and then representing that. And then, just kind of really going from there and not reproducing Western normative queerness in Bollywood and Hollywood cinema.
Faraz, you have a foot in both doors, as you've mentioned. I mean, what would you say are the main challenges for both Western cinema, but also when you reflect on the influence of Bollywood?
I think, Jason, to be honest, I really feel that when cinema is really personal, when cinema comes from a place of your own personal experiences and your personal understandings, there is a sense of honesty attached to it, and that honesty could be Hollywood, it could be Bollywood, but at least it's doing justice to the storyteller who's trying to tell the story, whether it's here or whether it's there. I feel the larger point or the larger picture is to be able to convey emotions, to be able to create a narrative that comes from a place where there is a sense of deep personal connect involved with the filmmaker versus the audience that you're catering to. I don't really hold myself back thinking, is this Bollywood enough or is this Hollywood enough? I just think that this is the story that I want to tell, and I go full throttle with it. So at no point of time do I really want to get into a place where I have to say, is this a stereotypically Bollywood, is this stereotypically Hollywood? Because I think that keeps changing, that keeps fluctuating. I mean, from what Bollywood was even 5 years ago to what Bollywood is now versus what Hollywood was 5 years ago to what Hollywood is now, right? I think there's been such a massive transformation, there's been such a massive evolution, not just in characters but also the kind of stories that are being told, the kind of a technology that is being used, which is also influencing emotions, which is also influencing the kind of narratives that we're really bringing forward. So I feel that personally, for me, having grown up in India, I don't really let Bollywood or Hollywood really overwhelm me. I just think that this is the story that has to be told, and I really run with it. So I feel that is also important, and I think to each a storyteller is their own sort of narrative that comes into play of who they are and being authentic to themselves. But I think when it comes to me personally, I don't really get caught up in these narratives of is this or is this that.
Is it unfair then to assess the progress of representation in both on the same scale, or is that fair game?
I think when it comes to representation, though, I think I think you have to look at it with a different lens. And I feel that Sonali here would be able to sort of to bring more light. I think you have to look at it in a more academic sense. We as storytellers can really to push forward representation. We can really to bring forward narratives that celebrate authentic representation. But is there enough representation happening both sides? I think that is a more academic question. I think we as artists, we can do our bit, to open up conversations, to open up dialogues, not just within the South Asian community, but with communities that are, beyond South Asian communities as well. I think when you try to push your cinema in a larger space, when you want your cinema to not just work back home in India, but also to work in the West. And when I say West, it is such a broad stroke, but it's interesting because a film that really works well in America might not work really well in Europe. And this is something that I'm learning and I'm discovering. It's there are very certain tastes of the kind of films that click in certain continents or in certain spaces, and that particularly has been a learning experience for me as well. So I think, again, the back to you, I think it definitely has to be a academic understanding, or is there enough representation, and is there good representation or bad representation?
Sonali, obviously, I think that answer was the equivalent of like sending the bat signal for Batman to come and take the stage, because the floor is yours for this answer, my friend.
Excellent question. So, I mean, very blunt answer, no, there's not enough representation. And it's actually quite interesting because the first academic study I did was to examine how queer South Asian women in Toronto's LGBTQ plus community experience racism, within that community. But every single participant that I spoke to actually directly mentioned, without a prompt, the lack of representation in media for queer South Asians. And that really came to show a full picture understanding that when we don't have representation of queer South Asians in media, especially in, prominent mainstream media, whether that's Bollywood and Hollywood, actually it was both, that actually causes racism to be that much more prevalent, and the culturally unique experiences of discrimination to prevail and persist. Because when there's not that representation, people can't acquire that knowledge of what a queer South Asian person, of the fact that a queer South Asian person exists, because you don't see it. And then because of that, the folks in the community will perpetuate Western normative ideologies, or just things that are very oppressive, and they don't allow queer South Asians to express culturally conducive queer identity. So that the fact is that, no, there's not representation, and that lack of representation is actually very dangerous and presents a safety risk for LGBTQ plus South Asians. And that is something that is very important, and why, we need films, we need books, we need mass representation where we can really showcase that LGBTQ plus South Asians exist. And that's also very going beyond that, very important to showcase that non-binary queer South Asians exist, that, South Asian queer women exist, the trans queer South Asian community exists, going beyond just men, like cis men that are queer and South Asian, so that we can show a wide spectrum of gender identities within the LGBTQ plus community. And that is honestly something that would significantly improve the mental health of queer South Asians, and just really bring together a sense of, because when you feel like you are seen, you're understood, that brings so much self-love. And that is a way that we can learn to accept ourselves. And that's also, as someone, I went viral on the internet for a photo shoot I did with my ex-partner, and every single, hundreds and thousands of messages coming in saying, I can finally accept myself because I can now see what a queer South Asian person looks like. So yes, representation is important. No, we don't have it.
No, great answer. I want to talk to you all about family, because that's another theme that's been brought up a few times so far in this conversation. Fawzia, maybe I can start with you, just while we're on transitioning from the conversation around Bollywood as well. I wonder how much art influences those who perhaps don't necessarily have the same nuanced background understanding with complicated conversations. I guess where I'm going with this, let me throw an example if you allow me. I'm trying to remember the name of the Bollywood film I watched with my mom in the theaters. Kabhi Alvida Na Kehna was this movie that talked about divorce, I think, for the first time. What is it, Karan Johal movie? Faraz, maybe right? But anyway, it talked about divorce, another taboo topic for the most part in South Asian community. And I remember that was never something I would talk about with the family at all because of the nature of it. And yet after watching it, you're forced to, right? Because you're sat in the theater for 3 hours, seeing something that would normally be never talked about at the dinner table, and yet you're forced to. And I wonder, Fawzia, for you, how much you think about that as a creator, as an artist, about the conversation that your work instigates at someone's dining table, for example.
Well, I mean, I write about family and my mom a lot. So I would say that the presumption that I think about it a lot is pretty on point. You know, I think as a creator, you want to have impact. I mean, I think that's just a place that a lot of us come from. You want to have impact for others because you're also looking to have impact for yourself. I mean, it's come up in everything we've talked about. I mean, I think I can only speak for myself, but I think as a community, we are seeking healing. We do struggle with mental health, and art is a way of healing both within ourselves and hopefully for others and changing lives. There was a feature that I made in 2017 called Signature Move, and it was the love story of a Pakistani Muslim woman and her Mexican girlfriend, inspired by my life. And also it was a rom-com, but it was really a mom-com because it was a relationship of the Pakistani daughter and her mother. And in that film, like, that was very much inspired by me. But what was so impactful about that film was, I mean, it helped heal my heart a little bit, but it also, you know, whether it was Pakistani and Indian and other South Asian folks that came up, and mothers or daughters or parents or children who were like, wow, that's like my family, or I saw that in my family. I mean, other Asian folks, non-South Asian folks, East Asian, Southeast Asian folks who were like, that really relates to me. Straight people who came up and were like, that is the portrait of me and my mother. I mean, that's motivating and that's driving. I mean, the number of people who have come out to me over social media or in person, who have said, you know, those same kinds of messages that, you know, Sonali, you were talking about in terms of this helped me come out, this saved my life, I see myself, like those keep you going. And I think that, you know, I don't anticipate ever having a perfect relationship with my mother. And yet the stories of other people finding healing or finding strength or finding hope continues to give me hope in all of those things. So I think it does matter, you know, and if I'd be lying if I said anything else, you know what I mean?
You mentioned, and I'm sorry to interrupt.
It's okay.
I'm so eager to know that, you know, you mentioned that your mom doesn't watch any of the films that you make, but does she know the impact that work does, especially when it reflects so much of your relationship directly, that has on those people who reach out and say, you know, I finally see myself, and I finally see the conversations and everything else that through your work?
I don't know. You know, I don't know. I can tell you that, I mean, we've come a long way in the last 15 years. And we have a long way to go. And obviously I very publicly share that. Will she see this interview? Probably not. Will someone tell her about this interview? Who knows? You know, that's just the way it is. I will say that there was this moment after I'd made this film, this Signature Move. We were in Pakistan, in Karachi, and there was a big article that came out about it because Shabana Azmi played my mother in the movie, and it world premiered at South by Southwest, and it had like a lovely, you know, kind of screenings around the world. But there was an article that was done while I was in Karachi that appeared in the paper, and it was, you know, like a full page in the entertainment section of one of the papers. And my mother and I did not talk about the movie. She did Shabana was very lovely and wanted to talk to my mom. So they FaceTimed, even though my mom has never seen the movie, doesn't, refuse to see it, but they did have a FaceTime. But then when this article came out, my mom definitely pulled it out of the paper and was walking around like showing it to people. I don't really know if she read it. So, but she had it, and it was really emotional for me. And truly, I'm a Pisces. I am full of emotion constantly. That is my truth. I'm just like an otter noodle swimming around in my sensitivity feelings. But to me, that is progress. And I think everyone's family relationship is super different. It's why, like, when people are like, you got to come out, I'm like, well, if it's safe for you, sure. But if it's not, no. And everyone's relationship is so different. But for me, that was a huge step in our relationship. And it made me think that we could be okay. And so regardless of what I am portraying in my work, like, the assumption that it's like so easy at home, it's just so different, right? And I think that's where the art also is so therapeutic for all of us, because it also is aspirational. We can write the thing that we crave. We can write the thing that we want. And that's part of the magic of it.
Faraz, does that resonate with you?
It does. Interestingly enough, I think, I could relate to a lot of things that Fawzia was saying, because I've also had a lot of South Asian people, a lot of people who've recently watched my film at Frameline, and they wrote me these long letters, that they had, after they saw Sheer Korma, they actually came out to their mom. I mean, this one particular person, she happened to be in her early 40s, and her mom is in Pakistan, and she saw Sheer Korma at Frameline, and then she called her mother, and she came out to her. And later she said, would you like to FaceTime with my mom? My mom wants to say hello to you. And I was like, sure. So we FaceTimed with, her mom, and her mom was just, she was just giving me blessings on the phone. And I don't think she really understood, what really coming out really meant. I think, the daughter, obviously she identifies as bisexual. So she must have, I don't know even how would you define bisexual in Urdu for that matter, because language is such a funny thing. But it was beautiful to share that moment. And then later she said, aap to Hindustan, you're in India, so I don't know if you'll ever be able to come to Pakistan, but if we are in America together, I'd love to take you out for dinner. And it was really beautiful, because I've never had that with my own mom. I think it's interesting, Jason, because I think acceptance and love are journeys. They're not really destinations. These are journeys that we are on for a long time, for the rest of our lives, until the last day. And I feel that, like Fawzia, I have been on a journey with my mom as well, this journey of acceptance. So it is multi-layered in that sense. And I feel that every time, just the way Fawzia's mom does, every time I'm on the front page of a newspaper, she'll run around with it, showing it to every person across the world. But every time we want to talk about my sexuality, we don't want to talk about it. But we want to celebrate the successes. We want to celebrate all of that. In fact, my mom saw Sheer Korma with Shabana ji just 2 weeks back. And I was really apprehensive. I was so nervous, because not just because Shabana ji was watching it. I was just nervous that my mom is going to be watching the film for the first time. And it is a deeply, deeply, deeply personal film. And I was super nervous, but she saw it, and then we didn't really speak much about it. But on our way back home from the screening, she turned to me and she said, how are you so brave? And that's all she said. And I said, I don't know. I think I get it from you. And it was just that, I think we don't really talk about these big conversations about, mom, I'm gay and all of that. But I think these are the conversations that really happen, these conversations that are really, you want to say so much, but you really end up saying something which is totally out of all the things that you want to talk about. But somehow it just sums up everything, it sums up every lived experience that you really had.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that, both of those anecdotes, actually. Somehow we're just about out of time as well. It's amazing how fast it can fly with these conversations. But I wonder if I can ask you each a question for those who may be watching right now, who are newer to the craft of filmmaking, or are just starting out with their art. I wonder what your message to them would be. Sonali, if I can put that to you first.
I'm not a filmmaker, so I'm not sure if I can answer that. But in terms of putting out creative work more broadly, or community organizing, which is also something that I do, I would say that being in the closet is still a valid space to be creating from and organizing from. So for me, like, it is something that I do. I mean, I gamble all my risks and my parents don't know, and they always ask what I do, and I just say, oh, just South Asian stuff, leave out the queer conveniently. But that didn't stop me from wanting to, you know, work towards creating visibility in all other ways as much as possible. But I would say that also knowing that the risks are there. Like, I definitely got outed a couple of times and had to flee family violence. So just making sure that, you know, you have that backing, you have that grounding, and obviously doing it in the safest way possible. I think that creating and just creative work in any way regarding the queer South Asian experience both is so tremendously healing and also is amazing for enhancing visibility. So that's just pour your heart out is my only advice.
It's great advice. Fawzia, for you?
I guess I'd say don't be afraid to write the truth and create the truth whatever that is and wherever it comes from. If you have to use your name or a pseudonym, whatever is safest. The truth is what people want, and it's what you deserve, is to tell the truth about your experiences, and every story matters. You know, I think people forget that, like, every single one of us is a storyteller. Like, we are literally telling hundreds of stories a day. Like, oh my gosh, you won't believe what happened to me this morning, or I had to take the bus or the train and this happened, or like, oh my God, my stomach hurts because of this breakfast I ate, like, constantly. And so that all has a place and a space to be translated into a poem or you know, into a short story or a novel or a movie. And you know, if you have access to an iPhone, you can make a movie. If you have access to the internet somewhere, you can put up a poem. And I think patience is really key too. If you're thinking about this as a career, it doesn't happen overnight. You know, no matter what you see, it really does take patience and time. And so stick with it. And I think it's really important to have community and connection, or like a strong foundation outside of the art you're creating. So, you know, if you decide to make filmmaking your life, great, but also have something outside of that world that is something you love, whether it's, you know, a community of people or other hobbies, or you know, I always say that my foundation is my wife, Andrea Wilson Mirza. Like, without her, I could not be or could not create, because the ups and downs of creation do take such a toll on our mental health. And it is not sustainable if our lives are solely based on that. And so really find the grounding and the foundation outside of that as well. And it'll create a safe space to be in it for as long as we need, so that more of us can see your work.
And Faraz, for you?
Jason, I feel that filmmaking is a privilege. It's a very big privilege. And I think if you get an opportunity to make a film, please use it wisely. Use it to speak to a lot of people, probably like you or who are not like you at all. But at any cost, just always be honest and be authentic. I think that's the most important thing. It is a pretty lonesome career, like Fazia said. It's not easy being a storyteller. I think it takes a lot of life and a lot of love out of you. So I think have a system, of love and a support that exists for you. And know that being a filmmaker, you can really be as strong as a president or a prime minister of any country, really. I think what filmmakers can really do is change the subconscious of people. We can change the way people think, the way people love, the way people heal. And I think to have such a big responsibility, I think to recognize that responsibility is very, very, very essential.
It is such a pleasure to get the chance to speak with all of you. I cannot thank you all enough for this conversation. What an amazing one it has been. So my thanks to all of you for taking the time and being so generous and incredible with your thoughts and your time. So thank you.